Two different media publications have contacted people for quotes on this story. The basis of their story is that this company has determined that Candace Owens' appearance on Sean Ryan contained this coded, cryptic language that was secretly telling people to go out and commit violent acts, even though Candace Owens, as have I, and many others, we are not alone, have made it very clear that violence is unacceptable. Well, after the Candace Owens-Sean Ryan interview, Candace Owens put up a couple of tweets. NBC has a 5-hour deadline for comment on this, so tweets Candace Owens. For reference, NCRI, we'll talk about them in just a second, same Zionist group that brought us the Christ is King is anti-Semitic study. This time, it's anyone who notices Erika Kirk keeps lying is responsible for her receiving death threats. And there is a request here for comment on a story that's going to be printed in 5 hours. Well, that's one thing she put up, and then she put another one up shortly after that. Now NBC is doing a hit piece. NBC is now citing the Sean Ryan interview as an example of conversations that are deadly to Erika. This is a real email. They say it's akin to rhetoric that caused Trump's assassination attempt. Now they're admitting left-wing rhetoric caused Trump's assassination attempt. That's a big step. Well, what is NCRI? Let's take a look at it. Just briefly, because we have to know who is this that's pushing this. This is the NCRI founder, Joel Finkelstein, Chief Science Officer, co-founder of the Network Contagion Research Institute. The Network Contagion Research Institute. This is Joel Finkelstein. That's a picture there of Mr. Finkelstein. What is Joel Finkelstein? Who funds Joel Finkelstein? Well, according to Wikipedia, we have an idea of who funds this outfit. NCRI funders included the liberal Open Societies Foundation of George Soros and the conservative Charles Koch Foundation, the Koch Foundation. It was paid $335,000 by Israel on Campus Coalition. The next year, Israeli businessman Iran Tabul stated that his organization, Hetz for Israel, has privately raised funds for NCRI. It's noteworthy that NCRI founder Joel Finkelstein is a director of Hetz for Israel. 2023, the Ruderman Family Foundation paid NCRI to conduct a study about anti-Semitism. The research, the report, found that anti-Zionist campaigns and narratives on Twitter are largely anti-Semitic. Of course it did. RFF, which is based in the U.S. and in Israel, works to solidify the relationship of the state of Israel with American Jewry, not jewelry, Jewry. In 2026, Finkelstein had to come out and say that all the donors are U.S. citizens. Why would he have to say that? Well, because it doesn't look like it. That's why you would have to say it, because it obviously doesn't look like it. Well, what do they do? What do they do? Well, let's go to their Form 990 and find out what it is they say they do when they're talking to the U.S. federal government. Because anybody can put anything they want on a website, but when you're talking on their taxes, you've got to be honest, or at least you got to give a story they'll buy. NCRI uses its Contextus platform to embed, track, and expose the meaning of language, videos, and images used within web communities that increasingly signify hate and encourage violence. In other words, even though what you're saying isn't hateful or violent, they will use a proprietary platform to say that what you are saying signifies hate and encourages violence, even if that's not what you're doing. But they've got a platform that'll say that's what you're doing. That's how you read that first sentence. NCRI exposes cryptic, violent, and genocidal language and symbols within social media communities and tracks the meaning and context of their coded language. Meaning and context is applied to from them. They'll tell you what your own words mean. As a result, NCRI has emerged as one of the leading authorities in the world on how social media-inspired domestic terror operate. In other words, you say something like, Erika Kirk's a liar. They run those words through their platform, and they come out and say, that is cryptic, violent, and genocidal language. You are inspiring domestic terror. And there's nothing you can say about it because they're the world's leading experts, the world's leading authorities. So who are we to argue with them? Don't believe me? They're one of the world's leading authorities. Two different media publications have contacted people for quotes on this story. The basis of their story is that this company has determined that Candace Owens' appearance on Sean Ryan contained this coded, cryptic language that was secretly telling people to go out and commit violent acts, even though Candace Owens, as have I, and many others, we are not alone, have made it very clear that violence is unacceptable. It's off the table. Nobody should commit any violent acts. I go as far as saying nobody should be contacting anybody. You shouldn't be emailing them. You shouldn't be calling them. You shouldn't be stopping them in public. You know, if you see Andrew Kolvet, be polite, wave, and go on with your life. Nobody should be contacting any of these people. Nobody should be threatening any of these people. It's nonsense. This is a news story. We are covering news the best we can. If in the course of covering news, we find out that a public figure has told a falsehood, we document it. We document it on the show. We document it on X. That's very normal. You remember the phrase? Some of you may be too young. But in the mid-2000s, in the peak of the anti-war fervor that the left used to have, the phrase Bush lied, kids died was very common. And what it meant is George Bush lied to get us into war, and our soldiers died, and civilian children died as well. That's what it meant. It was just an acknowledgement that he was being less than honest. He lied about weapons of mass destruction. He lied about a lot of other things. The threats Iraq and Afghanistan posed to the United States. It's normal if you're a public figure and you tell something that's not true for people to document it. That's not domestic terror. That's not coded language. That's not you don't have to contextualize it. That's not encouraging anybody to do anything violent. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's just covering a news story. So why did NCRI get involved in this story? I've had trouble figuring it out because it doesn't make sense. So why are they so interested in this? Well, I found something interesting in doing a little research on NCRI. They've added someone new to their staff here in the recent past. Network Contagion Research Institute appoints Johnny Moore as a senior advisor on Middle East Affairs and associate director. Look at the date line there. May 20, 2026. It's July 5. We're talking 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. The Network Contagion Research Institute today announced the appointment of Johnny Moore as a senior advisor on Middle East Affairs and associate director, strengthening the Institute's leadership at a time of escalating information warfare, foreign influence operations, and domestic instability. Moore brings a rare combination of operational experience, strategic insight, and global engagement across government, civil society, and international networks. His appointment reflects NCRI's continued expansion into national security oriented. Okay, well, who is Johnny Moore? We did a whole show on him. I don't want to go through the whole show we did, but we previously talked about a business he had called Kairos, K-A-R-I-O-S. And we talked about someone who helped found Kairos with him. You might recognize this feller. His name is Andrew Kolvet. It's a very old picture of Andrew there. Here it is. Vice President of Communications, the Kairos Company. Experienced communications marketing professional dealing with major brands, nonprofits, and high-profile thought leaders, authors, and commentators. Oh, I think I get it now. I think I get it. I think I know where we're going here. When we did our show, Johnny Moore, we showed his bio from the Kairos Company. This is his company. Notice this paragraph here. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just follow along with me as I read a selection from this paragraph here. I'll make it a little bigger for you if I can. I don't know how big I can make it. During the Obama administration, Reverend Moore visited Capitol Hill to warn about the existential threat that a little-known terrorist group, later known as ISIS, posed to the ancient Christian communities of the Middle East. His advocacy was largely met by indifference and skepticism, but he continued to raise alarm. By the fall of 2014, so 6 months or so later, ISIS had indeed embarked upon a reign of terror across Iraq and Syria, decimating ancient Christian communities. It was then that he traveled to the region himself to meet with regional leaders, including His Majesty King Abdullah of Jordan and various religious and community leaders who had been displaced by ISIS in Jordan and Iraq. That's awfully... Do you have a crystal ball? You know, one of the things Donald Trump told us was Barack Obama founded ISIS. And I believe him. That's back when I could believe what he said. A lot of us think, your humble host included, that ISIS was an op and that it was put in place in order to give us an excuse to be over there. Weird that Johnny Moore knew about it in advance. Not many people knew about it in advance. Johnny Moore knew about it in advance. That's a little bit from his bio. Here's a little more Johnny Moore before I go through just a quick greatest hits of Johnny Moore. He is currently the Vice Chancellor and Managing Director of Middle East Studies at Pepperdine. Vice Chancellor, Managing Director of Middle East Studies, Pepperdine University in Washington, D.C. So here is his bio. It's almost all in the Middle East. Now let me go through a little greatest hits section here of Johnny Moore. Pull this over here so I can just read from it. This is just a little bit of what Johnny Moore has been up to. July 2015. In an interview with disgraced pastor Greg Laurie, he talked about failed states, what they have in common. He talked about how in 2010 there was only one failed state in the Middle East. And by the time this interview kicked off in July of 2015, there were 5 failed states in the Middle East. He talked about how individual Christians need to give their money to people doing work over there, like Samaritan's Purse, who has been called Israel's #1 ally. Later in 2015, he works on the Iraq to Slovakia refugee evacuation, coordinated with broadcaster Glenn Beck. 2016, he's appointed to the Trump Campaign Evangelical Executive Advisory Board. 2017, the youngest ever recipient of the Simon Wiesenthal Center's Medal of Valor. He joins the Anti-Defamation League Task Force in 2017. On 2018, he's appointed by Trump as commissioner to U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. He met with the Prime Minister of Israel. The current now is also, again, the Prime Minister of Israel after Billy Graham passed. And he co-founded the Congress of Christian Leaders with a guy named Samuel Rodriguez, and it turns out all they do is promote our greatest allies propaganda. He led or participated in evangelical meetings with the President of Egypt, the Crown Prince of the UAE, the President of Azerbaijan, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, the Prime Minister of Sudan, and was the World Economic Forum delegate to the Middle East. Bragged about having clients like Paula White, PragerU, The Blaze, and Turning Point USA. This is Johnny Moore. This is who just joined the NCRI 6-7 weeks ago, and now they're attacking Candace Owens. This is the guy, when all those things were happening that I just read, was working with Andrew Kolvet at Kairos. So this is the context you have to understand what I'm about to show you. How Andrew Kolvet ever got involved with Charlie Kirk in the first place. We've covered this, but I think it's important. We're going to cover it again. Because Andrew Kolvet went on a podcast with the New York Times and had the following to say to the host, Ross Douthat. Yeah, I'll go a step back. I was actually living and working in Hollywood. I had a job working with Mark Burnett of The Voice, Celebrity Apprentice, Survivor, and Shark Tank. He was doing those projects, then at some point he got into faith-based content. I was thrown into the deep end. One day we would be at Jimmy Kimmel, or we'd be at one of the nightly shows, and then we would go to CNN, and then we'd go on Fox, and then we'd be at a church. Mark's chief of staff at the time, a guy named Johnny Moore, started a PR company. He asked me to start it with him. This is the guy who just joined NCRI, the company who 6 weeks after he joins it begins launching an attack on Candace Owens and planting stories in the news about how what Candace Owens is saying is putting Erika Kirk in danger, even though all Candace Owens is doing is covering the news. That's Johnny Moore.